It is 10 o'clock and we are webcasting whatever's going on now, so if we can call to order. First thing we have on the agenda item is apologies.
Chair, we have received apologies from Councillors Peters and Francis.
Do we know of any other apologies? No? Take those as read. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? I think that's a no. The minutes of the last meeting were those of the 25th of October. Can I sign those as a true record? Okay, will do. Which then brings us on to item 4. Item 4 is empowering our communities. And we have some guests here. Victoria, would you like to lead off?
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and good morning to everybody, even Jeremy. So today we're sharing with the committee the draft community's position statement and the draft community's delivery plan for 2023 ahead of a discussion that we'll be having with the Cabinet in February. As one of the 4 how we work statements in the strategic plan, empowering our communities needs to be at the heart of everything that we do as a council, obviously, from community managed libraries and the Household Support Fund through to the community champions and our new voluntary sector contract. We've done a vast amount of work with our partners and residents in the past 18 months to support the communities within the county. But we know that there is more to do. Our work with communities is even more important now than ever before as residents continue to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic and deal with the increasing cost of living. The draft community's position statement sets out what's been achieved over the past 18 months and what we aim to do going forward. So this, as you see in the report, includes a clear and detailed delivery plan for next year, as well as engaging with communities and our partners next year to develop an ambitious community strategy for Staffordshire. And we're doing this now to enforce to the organisation the importance of this work. We want to make sure we're really clear about what we want to achieve with our communities and how we plan to do that. So we're asking the committee this morning to share all your thoughts, feedback and input that you have on this draft community's position statement and the draft delivery plan that we've shared with you. And we're also keen to hear your thoughts on our proposal to engage with communities next year to develop a long-term ambitious community strategy for Staffordshire. All your feedback will be really important in helping us finalise the documents and shape the conversation that we have with our Cabinet members next Feb. And I will now hand over, if I may, to Catherine and then Kerry, who will talk through the draft community's position statement and the delivery plan in a little bit more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Continuing to help our residents live in thriving and sustainable communities is absolutely a key priority in our strategic plan for 2022-26. The draft community's position statement therefore reflects the importance of this work and the need to clearly articulate the actions we're taking to achieve this aim. This document highlights the importance, as Victoria has said, of working alongside residents, communities and our VCSE sector to draw on all of the existing strengths and assets within a community to embed new approaches to prevention and early help in public services. We want to create the right conditions for our communities to thrive and places where people can contribute, help themselves and each other. Since 2015, we've achieved a huge amount by working in partnership. We continue to be ambitious and we know we want to do much more. Pages 13 to 15 in your pack summarise the key highlights and achievements of the work we've done with communities, our VCSE and public sector partners during the last year. We conclude this section with cross-cutting achievements before we set out what we mean by empowering Staffordshire's communities on page 15. Empowering our communities is one of our How We Work statements, and to achieve this, we've identified 3 strategic objectives to focus our work over the next 12 months. We have detailed how we will achieve this on pages 16 to 18. We have very purposely described this document as a position statement, as it sets out the progress we've made to date and what we plan to do in the immediate future. However, over the next 12 months, we do want to go even further. We want to work with our residents, communities and businesses and partners to develop a long-term aspirational community strategy. Empowering our communities is everybody's responsibility. It includes all areas of the council, from members to frontline workers, as well as working closely with our partners. As such, our approach to delivery will coordinate this activity in an effective and collaborative way. The community's delivery plan for 2023 is included in your pack and contains further detail on how we will achieve the objectives set out in this document, and Kerry will now take you through this.
Morning, thank you, Chair. So the community's delivery plan is in draft format. It's still being worked on by officers. However, it is organised around those 3 strategic objectives that are within the position statement. So embedding community-led prevention and early help, promoting social action and building community capacity, and supporting our organisation and others to have a community's mindset. Some of the key programmes of work that we are looking to deliver in the next 12 months to meet those objectives include developing the family hub model in children and families, further development of the supportive communities programme in health and care, round 3 of the Climate Change Action Fund, continuing to deliver our community managed libraries offer and the broader libraries community offer. As part of our objective to promote social action and building community capacity, this will include delivering next year's Members Fund, further Doing Our Bit communications campaigns and a refresh of the Doing Our Bit look and feel, and continuing to support the voluntary sector through our recently recommissioned VCSE capacity building framework contract. In terms of the third objective, to support our organisation and others to have a community's mindset, we will be working internally to challenge our approach to commissioning. We'll be exploring opportunities for better partnership working and making sure we're reviewing our internal policies to ensure that they empower our communities and support our services to think communities. The draft delivery plan sets out the key activities that we're looking to deliver alongside key measures of success, milestones and cost. And it further helps to reiterate how communities is everyone's responsibility, with nearly all Cabinet members being responsible for at least one element within the plan. The community's delivery plan is overseen by the Cabinet Member for Communities and Culture, and from an SLT perspective, the Director for Economy, Infrastructure and Skills. We have a well-established communities leadership group within the organisation, which brings together senior officers from across the County Council with our VCSE infrastructure partners to coordinate, collaborate, and most importantly, monitor progress against the community's delivery plan. We are committing that we will bring an annual report that summarises our progress against the delivery plan through to both corporate overview and scrutiny committee and also Cabinet to ensure we've got oversight and scrutiny of progress and also our commitments within that delivery plan. So that's a very quick overview of both the position statement and the delivery plan, and open up for questions and feedback. Thank you.
Nobody's indicated a question yet. Can I ask the first one then? I have a sort of parochial interest in this, and I was doing a similar role to Councillor Wilson at district level as Communities Health and Housing member. And I well remember that there were a lot of activities that were going on at the county and lots of strategies, and there were lots of community activity and strategies at district level, and never the twain shall meet. You know, both myself and my county colleague were busy identifying lots of strategies and lots of plans, and as you've got on the table here, estimated costs and who was leading on them. But my question really is, how often do you get together with your colleagues at the similar levels in the districts and boroughs?
That's a good question. We're working closely with parish councils, but we're also working hard with districts and boroughs. There are particular leads within each of the 8 districts and borough councils that we do try to tie into, but I think a lot more of that needs to happen. I don't know if you want to come in.
So almost on each of those programmes in the delivery plan, there is engagement happening with district and boroughs. So for example, around children and families and early help, there are conversations going on with district and boroughs about the opportunities to join up, as well as with supportive communities as well, which is the key health and care programme of work. There's also, as part of the proposal to develop a long-term strategy, what we're suggesting is ideally we absolutely need to do that with our district and boroughs, and it would be a fantastic opportunity for us to develop a one Staffordshire strategy. So that is something that we are keen to take forward. Again, on another practical note, obviously cost of living, district and boroughs are obviously doing a significant amount of work on that. And we had a discussion on that very issue at Leaders Board a couple of weeks ago, where we discussed a paper that highlighted all those key initiatives. Out of that Leaders Board conversation, we're actually establishing a district and borough and county officers group around cost of living, again, to make sure that we're joining up, sharing what's going on and looking for those opportunities to work together.
Okay, it's an opportune time to mention it since Kerry's about to transfer into a district responsibility. Charlotte Atkins.
Thank you. First of all, to talk about engagement with other councils, certainly my experience is that the engagement of the county council with certainly town councils is minimal, shall we say, and within this statement on page 24, it talks about town and parish councils taking an even greater leadership role in addressing strategic issues locally. Well, obviously, there's a huge variation between town councils. I mean, for instance, if you would look at the Moorlands, you know, Biddulph have developed an amazing scheme for warm spaces and everything else, and Leek hasn't. And generally, you know, in the Moorlands, so far, they've set up a website, which, you know, is as far as we've gone. So if you're talking about them developing more strategic ownership of local issues, how are things going to change? That's my first question. Second question is that you seem to be focusing a lot on developing community health points. You talk about, we'll further develop community health points. What exactly does that mean? Does that mean that the county will actively be supporting community health points, or does that mean you basically hand over responsibility for county council signposting and so on to community health points without any additional resources? Because I think one of the problems is that, particularly during a cost of living crisis, that community organisations are massively stretched. And to suggest, as this paper does, that somehow there's a huge amount of capacity in the voluntary sector, I think is slightly misguided. And thirdly, I would like to ask about the community's highways offer, because I understand that that's dependent on additional funding. And does that mean you're waiting for the local government settlement? And what is the new community's highways offer? Thank you.
So I'm going to hand over to colleagues shortly, but just to start off, we have 187 town and parish councils in this county. Some of those are affiliated to the SPCA, and we're going to be doing a piece of work with the SPCA to try and bring people together and work best practice more cohesively. Unfortunately, there are parish councils and town councils that just aren't interested in engaging, and that's fine too, because it's whatever works in the patch. We can't force people to come on board with us, but we do try to engage with them. But it's a matter of choice. We have some that are really, really forward-thinking, like Biddulph, Kinver. There's lots of parish councils that really want to work with us, and there are some that sadly just have their own thing and they just want to keep things to themselves, and that's absolutely fine too. In terms of capacity of these community groups, well, you're all aware of the community fund. There are lots of areas in the county where the community fund isn't actually picked up. But the areas where it is picked up, you sometimes only need a tiny, tiny amount of money for them to get the ball rolling. And then they can go off on their own and do amazing things. And I see all the time some of the great community initiatives that go on around the county. And that's helped by us. But in the end, they go off and do it on their own because we help them start it off. So So, you know, we are doing a lot to help these community groups, but I do agree with you that there is this issue about capacity, but it's just something that we have to keep working towards achieving. In terms of the highways offer, I have been speaking with my cabinet member for highways and looking at how we put together some sort of plan where once again we say to parishes and local community groups, you know, if you want to do something, do it, tell us about it, and if we can help you, we can help you. That might not be financial, that might be just helping them with, you know, litter picking equipment or what have you. But we need to try and put that into a framework somehow, and that's an ongoing conversation. But I'm not sure if Kerry or Catherine want to come in just to fill in some gaps.
Can I just respond about the community help points? It's not about divesting our responsibility. It's about how we support organisations to work with them to signpost them to other support and advice that's available within that community. And very much, as Councillor Greatorick said, it's about joining up what resources there are already existing within that community. So we will continue to do that. We recognise that there's more work to do. Community help points are quite new really in terms of their embedding, so they're across some libraries but not all libraries. But it's not about handing over responsibility for our library offer. It's making sure that people that work within those libraries know how they can clearly signpost people to other support and advice that's available. The other thing that we've been doing as well recently to help to build capacity within the voluntary sector is we have been developing some guidance for volunteers that support the county council so that we very much ensure that there's a positive volunteer experience and that we're not then reliant on those volunteers, but they're getting something back at the same time, and that there will be more coordinated approach. So it's something that has been done through the community's leadership group, and we hope to have that guidance ready in January to share with the wider organisation.
Back on the community help points, I mean, clearly some are libraries and some are other sorts of organisations. And I think the worrying thing for me is that if you go on the website, as you always ask people to do, and you look at all the various things that they can get from a community health point, well, where a community help point is not a library and there are virtually no full-time staff, it's very difficult for that organisation suddenly to jump into, for instance, I think on the website it says, you know, to find you a cleaner or find you a gardener or whatever. And I think in that situation there has to be much more liaison between the county council and the help point to see what realistically they can do. But can I just ask another question? Yeah, okay. I mean, I know that there is a section here about how you're going to measure all this, but it doesn't seem to be... It doesn't seem to cover a huge amount of what the results are going to be. You know, it's sort of like how many people take up the community fund, how many people get involved in the youth offer. And I just worried that the metrics for measuring the impact of this strategy seem to be somewhat thin. And I just wondered what work you were doing to make sure that was more focused. My concern is, as Colin was saying, that, you know, you'll have lots of activities going on in little pockets, but they're not joined up, and that some communities will get a reasonable offer, others will get nothing. And it just worries me that the way that you are measuring this activity doesn't actually amount to a strategy. It amounts to picking up on particular issues happening or particular innovative developments in particular areas, and it doesn't really add up to a strategy.
I think it's difficult to measure this in terms of data and numbers and how many people we helped and how many people did we divert from using other services. It's difficult to do that, but what we do know is that with the community fund, for example, we give £1 out. From that £1, it's something like £10 back. So I suppose in that way you can measure it that way. But it's a similar thing to the sort of the children's transformation, isn't it? Where, you know, you just don't know if you hadn't had that children's transformation. You just don't know what the figures would look like now. It would probably be 3 times worse for all we know. It's hard to measure sort of someone's goodwill and how somebody helps somebody else on paper, isn't it? But, you know, that is something we can look into.
We have a section in the position statement around measuring success, and in the delivery plan as well, we are working across the organisation to try and firm up some key performance indicators and measures of success for each delivery plan. I think, as we're all aware, what we don't want to be in a position is where we're just picking 1 or 2 key performance indicators that then can actually skew the picture. So we're trying to work to make sure we've got a good basket of indicators that help to really explore both those outputs and hopefully those outcomes as well. In the section on measuring success, we do outline that at a strategic level, what we're really hoping this position statement and then the delivery plan helps to achieve is that increasing the feelings of pride in our communities, making sure we're increasing the number of people who feel they can access support and help from within their communities. And as you say, Councillor Atkins, at a county level, that might skew some local differences. So it's important that, as well as looking at county overall, we're also looking at a locality basis as well. And then the third key kind of strategic outcome is that we want to increase the amount of community support that's available in Staffordshire. We very much, as part of that section, highlight that at the moment we are doing some work to explore how we can establish those metrics, making sure we've got the right methodologies and baselines that will then allow us to monitor our strategic progress as well as some of the output performance indicators that are part of the delivery plan.
Lastly, could you tell me how you've measured the success or otherwise of doing our bit? I mean, how have you measured what has come out of that? What has been achieved by that initiative? Are there any pointers which you can use from that experience to go further and look at the experience of the wider strategy?
So in terms of doing our bit, we are, it's very much on a campaign by campaign basis. And again, we make sure we set performance measures before we set off on those campaigns. So it'll be, for example, how many people have interacted with either our social media posts or so forth, how many referrals have come through from that particular campaign as well. There is a significant amount of learning from the last kind of 2 years of doing our bit, which we want to use moving forward to do a bit of a mini refresh of doing our bit. We've also learnt what campaigns work best, which are more successful and which are least. So again, moving forward, we can focus our campaigns on those more successful initiatives.
Okay, I now have 5 speakers waiting to speak, so there's a bit of a queue. Councillor Samantha Thompson.
Thank you. Charlotte took my first question about highways, so I look forward to see what comes out of highways. Thank you. My second one was, during COVID, I was part of a community group and I worked with the district, and I just wanted to say that county worked with us as well, and it was very, very good. You know, they picked up things that we couldn't do as a district or the community group couldn't do, like with food boxes, or if we had a person of concern, we would bring it to county's attention and they would then take it from our hands. So I felt that we did have that interaction at Cannock. I have to admit, we did have that interaction at Cannock, so thank you.
Okay, Councillor Pert.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. To the leader, I'd just like to say the answer to his relatively simple question. I apologise for not knowing it and being able to read it off the top of my head is Bogota. That was good. And it's nice to see we got such a top team in for us this morning on a cold December morning. I think we should welcome a few things. The first thing we should welcome is the continuation, which even though we haven't yet gone through the whole of the MTFS process, the continuation of the Members' Fund. So I think we should welcome that because at least that is some funding that is really useful to lots of very able community groups. And as the Cabinet Member said, small amounts of money can go a long, long way. I think the second thing we should welcome is this plan, because without a plan, you plan to fail, in my view. Or alternatively, we don't know whether we've reached success or not. I'll come on to the plan in a minute if I can, please. And I think we should also welcome the real work over significant amounts of time of the voluntary sector. You know, we've been faced with one thing on another, and I don't think any of us would have expected to be where we are today, and the sheer calls on everyone in the voluntary sector is significant, and we should just probably just reflect and say thank you to everyone who is involved in that. So, let me just come onto my three areas, please. The first one is really quite simple. I asked myself a question, which is, what would be a step change in performance? What would be a transformation in dealing and working with communities? And I'm not sure with this plan that we're clear in terms of if we could do one thing and do it successfully, what it would be, because there's just so many strands of activity. And I just wanted to give you three thoughts on what it could be. First of all, I think if we had, as a public sector, a single plan which worked across all organisations working based on what our community needs were, that would make a fundamental difference. You have the NHS and the ICS and the ICB and the ICP with a health-based agenda. We have the County Council with an agenda which fits around their statutory requirements. And we have the districts and boroughs doing something that fits around their requirements. But effectively, we still only have one community. And I feel really disappointed that we do highlight in the report the importance of a discussion with the ICS. But in my view, this should be front line and centre, because actually if we could pull everyone together with a common agenda, we'd actually go so much further. And the best example of that is the response during COVID. So, and to find it sort of halfway down page 24 in the action plan, rather than the first thing we're going to do, we're going to engage everyone, get everyone on the page, and go and deliver for our communities, because that's the people who put us here. So I'm somewhat surprised at that. But that to me is a step change. What are step changes are there? In my view, social prescribing could be a step change. It could be a subset of what I've just described, however. I think town deals could be something, you know, or community-based deals. You know, we talk about devolution of power, and we want, as counties and districts and boroughs want devolution of power, but actually we don't talk about trying to devolve more with some money, not just the, you know, here, do some stuff for us. Actually, let's put some money around it, because actually we might be able to come up with some different answers. So I guess my first question is, you know, where is the step change, and why isn't it just ringing bells so everyone can say, yeah, we want to buy into that and join you on the journey, rather than lots and lots of actions? Secondly, I am slightly concerned with the action plan. It's missing some costs, but as Charlotte indicated, it really isn't smart in many places. You know, there's lots of input measures we measure. So for, you know, promoting supportive community, we're going to measure, you know, the number of campaigns completed. Well, come on, guys. You know, we need to be a bit more sophisticated, because you could do 1 million campaigns, reach one person, and it's completely ineffective. It's got to be how many people have we persuaded to do something different or join us on that journey. And if you say, well, that's just an isolated example, you know, on something to do with websites, we talk about Staffordshire Connects, we're going to measure the unique hits to the website. We should have an ambition which is, it's going to be the Amazon. I don't mean the Amazons in the rainforest. It's going to be the Amazon of websites. You know, come on, guys. You know, let's do it and do it well. And it seems to miss in timelines in many of this. When are we going to do this by? Because this committee wants to be able to go through it and support you on that journey. I think that's positively support you on that journey. And the final point I was just going to make was, in my experience, and I wear a number of hats in communities. In my experience, it is easier to start with a community focus first and find out what communities want, and then tag them to some of the stuff that we want. So all of the measures seem to be stuff that we want, rather than stuff that communities want. And I would heartily suggest that whilst the ambition is good, and it is good, maybe we just need to look at it from the other end of the telescope, and then go and talk to one or two communities, because you don't need every community out of the 160, 187, thank you. You don't need everyone on the page. You just need to find the early adopters who will come with you. Then you'll have a few more who'll follow because isn't that good? And then eventually we'll have everyone moving in the same direction. So there were 3 questions there. 1 relates to what's the step change, 2 relates to the action plan, and 3 relates to about whether we've got the community focused the right way round. Thank you, Chair.
Let's lead off with those.
Well, Councillor Pert doesn't disappoint. Could you just ask me again? No. Okay, so I take your point. I think very, very well made, and I don't disagree with a lot of it. And I love the enthusiasm that with which you're addressing this. I do feel that we can't do things county-wide because one size doesn't fit all. We've realised that. There is, people want different things. Even within my division, there are 7 parishes and each of them wants something different. So we can't do things to people. We want to work with them. So we want to ask them what do they want and how can we help them with that. And we're doing that, as I say, with some parish councils already, particularly Biddulph, who's going to take us up, hopefully, on a pilot scheme because they are so proactive and we want to work with them, see what they do, and then show everybody else this is the possible. Do you want to join us with this? So that's one thing. The other thing is a piece of work I'm doing now is to engage with the ICB in terms of social prescribing. We're trying that out in Uttoxeter and Burton, but that hasn't been finalised yet. So that's something that's a work in progress. The other thing is that we're saying to parish councils, lots of parish councils have their own neighbourhood plan, for example, or they're considering a neighbourhood plan. And what we're saying to them is, can you do something similar in terms of perhaps health, so that you're looking after your parishioners in a health-based sort of targeted approach? So there are a lot of things going on, and as you say, it is this sort of the art of the possible. I'll pass on to Kerry regarding the costs that are missing, that you say are missing out of the report. But again, I will say once more that we don't want to be doing things to people. We want the parishes to come to us and say, this is what we need and this is how we can help you. But I'll hand over to Kerry.
Thank you. So just a couple of points on some of those questions that Councillor Pert has put forward. In terms of that step change in performance, I think and again this is a SCC perspective rather than perhaps a community perspective, I think one of our biggest priorities is that first objective around embedding community-led prevention and early help. So ensuring that we are really doubling down and targeting early help and prevention concerning children and families and health and care. If we think about the biggest challenges that face us as a county council, they are our children's social care services and adult social care services. So the work in the delivery plan around early help, family hubs and supportive communities are, I would say from an SCC perspective, some of our absolute top priorities. Take the point that it's perhaps too far down in the position statement, that ambition around joining up with other public sector organisations. Hopefully the committee's had some reassurance that that is something that is being worked on both strategically and by the individual directorates to try and join up as much as possible. I think it's probably a reflection that we're also a very pragmatic organisation, that whilst we have that ambition to join up, it can also, as I'm sure colleagues can sympathise with, be frustrating and take a lot of time. Therefore, we are not just waiting on our public sector colleagues. We are cracking on and making sure that we're delivering for the people of Staffordshire. In terms of the delivery plan, thank you for those comments around those missing costs and the targets. I think, as I said at the start, it is a working draft. We're doing some further work and some further challenge with officers on those. So that's really helpful that we can take that back and use that feedback. This document is very much described as a position statement. It is a here and now look as to where we are and what we are looking to achieve over the 12 months. We do want to do that and develop that longer term aspirational community strategy, and absolutely that needs to be bottom up And again, hopefully colleagues have picked up in the position statement, we make it clear we want to co-produce that with our communities and making sure we're listening to what matters most to them and what will help them the most and build it from the bottom up. Thank you.
Spencer next.
Chair, thank you for that. I think firstly I would echo the points made by Councillor Pert about welcoming this report and the fact that it's really encouraging to see that it builds on work that we're already doing, the immense work that we're already doing. I also, though, think that, you know, and I think the member set out this morning as an introduction, making it absolutely clear that this is about trying to encourage communities to help themselves. And the report, I think, gives a theme of just encouraging community action. When I say just encouraging community action, there doesn't seem to me, when I read through it, much in the way of sort of coordination of some of that action. And I think, as other people have alluded to as well, sometimes, you know, when resources are tight, we need to make sure that that action is actually delivering what we want it to. Again, I don't want to just argue around titles and words, but generally this sort of an approach talks about building what they call social capital, rather than just encouraging community capacity. And you might think, well, you know, there's very little difference between the two. I think there's a huge difference between the two, if I'm honest, because the building of social capital gives an impression of being more sustainable in as much as it develops and improves to deliver what people want, not just encouraging community action. I would also say, I mean, there was a section, it talked about encouraging a community's mindset. I would have hoped that we had a community's mindset, to be fair, rather than talk about trying to encourage one. I think the measures and the biggest concern I had around it was how we measure some of this, and I know that other members have raised those concerns as well. I think if we had this drive around building social capital, then the measures for me would be about the use and the outcomes of whatever it was that we put in place. I do think when the section that talks about measuring success, I'm not sure how you measure pride in communities, if I'm honest. And I think when we set ourselves targets of trying to measure people's pride, we get lost in how, and we end up with some sort of a proxy measure of that. And I think the document talks about one thing, the measuring tends to be slightly off, because I suppose these things are difficult to measure. I would say, though, the second point about increase the number of people who feel they can access support from within their communities, that seems right to me. And I do think if we build those structures in place, that would seem to me to be the right sort of measure. Increasing the amount of community support, I think sometimes is just a proxy measure for dependency on a system. So I do think that the issue is about how we measure some of this. I would just ask for a check on where we're going with the strategy and what is our strategy. Is it just about encouraging community action, or is it genuinely about helping communities to help themselves? I do think there's a difference between the two. And I think once we get that right, I then think the use and outcomes of whatever we put in place will naturally fall out as the measures, and I would encourage us to move away from trying to measure pride and other such emotions. Thank you very much.
You want to respond to that,
I think the message is coming through quite clearly that you want to know how we're going to measure this. So thank you very much for your suggestions, and I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. We'll take that back. I don't know if either of you want to come in at this point.
No, just to echo that, really helpful kind of feedback, and we'll reflect on that. Let's say the Pride one is an interesting one. It's a perception measure, isn't it? So if we do include it, it's absolutely imperative that we don't look at it in isolation. And again, we look at a kind of a balanced basket of indicators around it. Thank you.
Next is Vice Chairman Jill Heath.
In defence really of when you say we've got all these parish councils and town councils and things. My division have 23 parish councils. I think the average number on the electoral roll is around 200. Some only meet every other month. One village and a hamlet meet twice a year. You know, there's either 5 or 7 perhaps elderly members of the parish whose relations have always been a parish councillor, and you know they take the tradition on. It's very difficult if they really, really want some. I have had odd occasions when they've wanted something for the village that they've had to have, you know, a sort of go round with a circular as everybody support them, and they put the precept up for 2 or 3 years, a special precept to get what it was they were wanting. But that's not going to happen very, very often. Yeah, so to put them all together and say, yeah, we've got 187, some don't get involved. It's just a little bit of defence for the ones that you maybe think aren't interested. They just haven't got the number of people and the presets and the cash to do it. You know, the biggest fights are getting the children to school if they're about 1 yard off the traditional. I've got a letter now, 200 yards. A lady's moved into a village with 4 children. She's 200 yards from the official distance that the children can go on the school bus that goes past the door with empty seats. You know, that's more in the where we get to in the community. Sorry if I'm having a moan.
Did you want to respond, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely understand that, and thank you for reminding us that there are parish councils out there who might need a little bit more help than others, and I suppose as councillors that's our role to bring that to the foreground, I suppose, really. And as I say, there are parish councils who feel that they can do very well on their own without us. So as I said before, it isn't a case of one size fits all. We're all different. It's a big county, and we all have different wants and needs, but thank you for raising that.
Take the 2 new speakers. We've got Councillor Worthington and Councillor Parry. Mike Worthington first.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. I just think I agree with Councillor Spencer, really. It's very hard to measure these things, but I think we should really think of the success that we've achieved. You know, with the free school uniforms, you know, we've spent £46,000 on free school uniforms. I think we should... this is, to me, this new plan is an aspiration really for the county council, but what we've done, to me, is a tremendous achievement what we've done with the libraries, the family hub model, supporting family programmes. I think over 1,200 families are supported. I think we should really concentrate on the success that we've already had last year and really wish Vicky and the team to carry on with the success, and I think it'll be good for Staffordshire, supporting families, giving Staffordshire children and young people the best start in life. I think we supported over 1,200 families. So I think let's concentrate on success, really, and look forward to even more success in 2023. Thank you.
Thanks for those comments. Councillor Kath Perry.
Thank you, Chairman. Just an observation, really, picking up on some of the points that other members have made. Thank you for the report, by the way. And I just think that it's a balance, isn't it, between bureaucracy, as they see it in the communities, being the council, whichever council it is, and actually the communities working for themselves. So whilst I agree we need to support whatever the communities need, it's that balance of not being to interfere, because interference is a no-no when it comes to communities. And I'm sure we don't do that, but it's that striking that balance so that we don't do that. We're there to help and let them get on with what they choose to do. I represent parishes in South Staffs, like most of you do. Victoria does as well. And each community is totally different, and their needs are totally different. So one size, as has been said, doesn't fit all. And they seem to know best on the ground. And it's there then that when they ask for the support, that we might be able to give it, whether it's monetary or whether it's just advice. I think that's the road forward, or the way forward. And that's just how I see it. So you have got it right in my eyes to see, you know, what's good for the communities, because they know best at the end of the day. They know what their needs are. They just want that help, so long as the bureaucracy doesn't come in, because sometimes when that steps in, they get knocked back. Communities get knocked back by people telling them, because it's as though people are telling them what they should do rather than what they want to do. So it's just a play on words, really, and I know, but I just thought it'd be, that's my point of view on the discussion that we're having this morning. Thank you.
Okay, we've got some second speakers. Councillor Jeremy Pert.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask what assessment has been made of the impact of the cost of living crunch on the voluntary sector and communities and their available capacity? I think everyone recognises the issue of the cost of living crisis that's there, but also that so many of our communities are coming together. But what assessment have we made about the impact and the available capacity? And second of all, have we also looked at what we could do to help them in the vital role that they're playing, so that we don't get more vulnerable people coming towards us?
So obviously we have two infrastructure partners, Support Staffordshire and Skivvies, as well as obviously having a contract with them. They also operate as our strategic partners. As such, myself and Catherine meet with them on a regular basis to touch base on, you know, the broader landscape of the sector, and we've obviously been asking those specific questions. The view so far from Support Staffordshire and Skivvies is the cost of living and the rising energy prices haven't yet started to really bite the voluntary, most community organisations, not all, but generally, they haven't yet started to see that really bite. But obviously the demand that they are seeing coming through the door is starting to increase. So we're absolutely keeping that watching brief with both Support Staffordshire and Skivvies. Our VCSE framework contract has a degree of flexibility so that we are able to call off additional asks via it. So we've been able to put some additional call-offs through some grant programmes that have gone to the Community Foundation, and we have been able to call off some additional asks from both Support Staffordshire and Skivvies with additional one-off money that we found. So again, that framework gives us the flexibility to do that, and I think that will be really important over the coming months. In terms of communities, I think it's fair to say that I think cost of living is affecting nearly every household in some way, shape or other across the county. Again, there's a piece of partnership work going on at the moment as part of the Staffordshire Centre for Data Analytics, with the county working with a number of district and boroughs to try and, again, look at what data we can share across the public sector to better target households that are going to be most vulnerable to the cost of living pressures. So that work is also underway to, again, make sure that the various efforts that are going on to make sure people have got the right information, advice and guidance on help is getting to the right households. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. A really useful answer, and thank you for that. So in terms of the additional support, I'm sure it's really welcome within the VCSE sector, and it's vital. So thank you for outlining that. Thank you.
Councillor Atkins.
Yes, I just wanted to ask about embedding the community offer in adult social care. And being parochial, I see that there's a pilot in Staffordshire Moorlands. Could you say a bit more about that and what it means in practical terms?
I can do it at a high level, Councillor Atkins. So obviously with the Supportive Communities programme, we've had the rollout of community help points, and we've been working with Support Staffordshire around growing community support around kind of adult social care, early help. What we're making sure we're doing the join up in, and we're using the Moorlands as a pilot, is to make sure that adult social workers are actually trained up and able to refer into that community support. So we're doing a a social prescribing basically for adult social care, and making sure social care workers on the front line have the information, the tools, and feel confident to refer into that community support.
This is happening now, is it?
I believe so, yes.
Councillor Mike Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I first of all say I welcome this plan. I can see there's been a tremendous amount of work gone into it to develop it so far. I do remind myself it is a draft plan, and of course I'm sure from the feedback today you're going to get and you will enhance that plan. So thank you for that. Coming back to parish councils, you say one size doesn't fit all. Well, I only have one parish and I've got 15,000 residents. So, in other words, my parish council is really bigger than some town councils. And of course, over the years, we've developed a way of working to support them. So, like I say, I'm really pleased that you brought it forward. I'm very happy that the content is part of the way there. And I'm sure after today's meeting, you'll get even further. But thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there are any other questions, but I just wanted to thank Councillor Davis. I know the work that is done in Wombourne is exemplary. We could really learn a few lessons from Wombourne Parish Council and from the councillor, but I'm really grateful to everybody for their suggestions. It's been a really interesting conversation, so thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd certainly reckon on having some exemplar parishes. I think it was said earlier, the more you can trumpet whatever has gone on for the other parishes. I think it was Councillor Pert said the others will follow then once you've got good examples. I do have one more parochial question I will ask. In my district capacity, I'm district chair, and I've got a charity which is helping the IT hesitant get online. I notice you've got Donate ICT with a scheme with 250 received pieces. I just wondered how many of those received pieces have been allocated and how you're going about allocating.
We are working in partnership both with Support Staffordshire and the Community Foundation to make sure that those devices are getting to the right people in our community. However, if it's something of interest, we can absolutely kind of join up the Donate It scheme and send you some more information on that, Chair.
There are no other questions, so I think it's already been said by Councillor Davis. Thank you for the report and the depth of it, and we've certainly given you some food for thought for how to measure and target and coordinate with other authorities. Okay, thank you for your participation. Item 5 is equalities, diversion and inclusion, and I think we're starting with a presentation. We've got a presentation in the corner which we'll start up. As if by magic it has appeared. I think it's with you, Leader, to introduce who you've got with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the invitation this morning to take you through the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Progress Update. You will anticipate a presentation. It's already up there in preparation for, I think Sarah's doing it. But joining me today is the top team, Sarah Getley and Kerry Dove. And for Councillor Pert, any questions I can't answer, I'm sure my more than able colleagues will outshine me anyway in answering those questions. Just before we do progress, though, this is Kerry Dove's last formal meeting, I think, isn't it? Before she leaves us to go to Lichfield District Council as the Chief Operating Officer. And in case I don't get the chance at the end of this presentation, Mr. Chairman, I would like to say very many thanks to Kerry for everything that she's done. She'll be missed from the County Council, but it is your misfortune that I'm also a Lichfield District Councillor, as is Councillor Greatorex. So I'm afraid you
Thank you, congratulations and welcome.
Yeah, so I'm afraid you won't be able to get away from the two of us. But Kerry's done an outstanding job, and just if I may regale you with some one brief anecdote, is that sometimes I embrace my certainty around certain issues, political issues, and then I confront the data that Kerry very gently presents in front of me. Rather than throw the data in my face like a wet towel, she serves it like a warm coat, just very gently, making me realise how wrong I am in some of the assumptions that I make, but does so in such a nice, gentle way that it's a pleasure. It has been a real pleasure to work with her, and I look forward to continuing that in, albeit as a very far backbencher at Lichfield District. So thank you, Kerry, for everything that you do. You're here today to look at the progress made over the past year of our equality, diversity and inclusion principles, note the gender pay gap report and workforce profile, and comment and feedback on the emerging priorities in 23-24. Some of the abbreviations in the emerging priorities for 23-24 passed me by, so if you do get stuck on any of the acronyms, then please do ask the expert here, Sarah. There are 3 principles that we operate: equality of opportunity, inclusive and diverse, and inclusive and accessible services. And our objectives here are to review and strengthen our recruitment and retention, strengthen our diversity and inclusion offer to employees, strengthen our engagement and collaboration with our communities, and celebrate diversity. You'll see in the report the numerous things that we have done over the past year in 22-23, albeit that 23 is not yet concluded, and then you have the opportunity to see what we will do in 2023 and 2024. This is a very important area of work for us. It's vital that our staff recognise that not only do we say that we are involved in equality, diversity and inclusion, but we actually act in that way with everything that we do as a council. So that's my very brief warm-up act, Mr. Chairman, and what I'll do now is hand over to, I think, Sarah, Kerry, no, Kerry, who will take you through the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. So as Councillor White has outlined, today we're sharing with you an annual progress report on our equalities, diversity and inclusion principles and objectives. We've also included copies of this year's gender pay gap and workforce profile to allow for a more rounded discussion this morning on equalities and diversity. Last year's Scrutiny considered a new set of principles and objectives and associated delivery plan, and that was then subsequently signed off by Cabinet. The paper looks to reinforce our commitment to equalities, diversity and inclusion, reflect on the past year and look ahead. Our strategic plan reiterates our commitment to ensuring everyone in Staffordshire has the opportunity to prosper, be healthy and happy, and everyone to achieve the outcomes we aspire to, regardless of circumstances. As a county council, we have a number of statutory equalities duties. The 2010 Equality Act requires the county council to publish at least one equalities objective every 4 years and ensure that we publish annual gender pay gap and workforce profile data. As an organisation, we reviewed our approach to equalities and diversity back in 2020-21, and as part of that review, we engaged with staff, members and stakeholders. The review highlighted many positives, but also highlighted that there were opportunities to further strengthen our approach. And that review concluded with Cabinet adopting the new set of principles and objectives. I'll now hand over to Sarah to take us through a review of the past 12 months.
Thank you, Kerry. One of the appendices to the report is our gender pay gap and workforce profile as it was published in April 2022, and that details both our data and steps taken to develop a more diverse and inclusive workforce. Just to highlight some of the key headlines from that report, since the point that we were required to publish the gender pay gap, that has continued to reduce year on year and now stands at 9.7%, and our median gender pay gap remains consistent at 13.7%. Both of those measures do remain lower than both the national and public sector benchmarks. What we do know is that the majority of our workforce are female, and with a high proportion of those in the lower pay quartile of our pay structure. However, the number of females within our upper pay quartile is increasing annually, and that has been a key driver to reducing our gender pay gap that we saw as reported in April this year. Our strengthened approach to equality, diversity and inclusion across all of the work that we've been doing and will continue to do so, we are confident that we'll continue to help reduce our gender pay gap as we move forward. Just to highlight some of the key achievements over the last 12 months, this has really been a collaboration between my function, which is People Services, Kerry's function in terms of the Policy, Performance and Insight team, and Christian's Communications team. Some of those key achievements are set out in the next couple of slides, and those include our new improved translation and interpretation contract that was launched in November of this year, and that is based on a one-stop shop delivery model. We've also strengthened and improved our community impact assessment and policy, which sets out a clear and consistent approach, and you will see those community impacts brought through to this committee and to Cabinet as changes are proposed to services that the Council provides or commissions. We've also launched an inclusive and representative employer brand in 2021, and that has seen what's followed recent targeted recruitment campaigns to promote the Council as an inclusive employer of choice. Seeking to improve our approach to recruitment, we've also implemented a new applicant tracking system, which is called We Recruit. That was launched in October of this year, and that's really to improve the whole candidate experience of those people that are seeking to join the County Council. Within that system, that also will enable us to better capture key equality information, which will in turn seek our ability to report on that data. Some of the other key achievements includes a new anti-harassment and bullying policy that was implemented in September of this year, and that really promotes our zero tolerance approach as an organisation to bullying and discrimination. There's been a calendar and package of communications across the year that has promoted key dates and events, really to celebrate and promote equality, diversity and inclusion both within the workforce and our communities. We've also commissioned a new equality, diversity and inclusion mandatory e-learning module, and that will launch in early 2023 alongside a new accessible recruitment training package targeted at our line managers who recruit into roles across the organisation. There are a number of self-formed employee groups that exist across the organisation. That includes a Black Workers Forum that came together about 18 months ago. What we've done is, learning from that experience, is drawn together some guidance to support other groups that may wish to form, drawing on best practice and the experience of our existing groups. And the final achievement to highlight, I'm sure you're very familiar with our Open Door programme that has been in place since 2010, and that's an employability programme that's targeted at people that face, for whatever reason, barriers to joining the workforce, and that supported over 1,500 job seekers through those work experience placements that we've offered. Looking ahead, to 2023-24, just to highlight some of the areas of focus. Clearly, we will continue to meet and improve on the delivery of our public sector equalities duties. We have a new people strategy in draft that will be coming through to this committee in the new year, and that will seek to embed equalities, diversity and inclusion into all of the work within that new people strategy. We will continue to develop and implement our range of people policies, including our recruitment and employment policies. As I've referred to earlier, the new Equality, Diversity and Inclusion mandatory e-learning module will be launched early in 2023. We will develop a new annual communications campaign and package in collaboration with key staff groups, which will be led by the communications team. And we will continue to embed equalities, diversity and inclusion into our new apprenticeship strategy, which is part of our people strategy work for next year. As well as the mandatory learning, we will strengthen our internal learning and development offer, and that will include a reciprocal mentorship scheme and developing resources to promote and support our managers and leaders in terms of inclusive leadership practice. I'll hand back over now to Kerry, who will go through the delivery and governance arrangements that are in place for this work. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. So Councillor White is the Cabinet Lead for Equalities, Diversity and Inclusion, with the Deputy Chief Executive and Director for Corporate Services as the Senior Leadership Team Lead. So as well as the overall objectives, they oversee the delivery plan as well. We have a cross-organisation officers steering group around equalities, diversity and inclusion, whose remit is to coordinate activity, collaborate and, importantly, monitor our progress against the delivery plan. The Equalities, Diversity and Inclusion Action Plan is a key deliverable within the organisation's corporate delivery plan. As such, progress is also reported quarterly via the Integrated Performance Manual process. As per the report last year, we are committing to do an annual monitoring report on our progress against the delivery plan, which is to be brought through to Scrutiny and this committee and then through to Cabinet. So next steps are obviously to take views and feedback from today's discussion, and then a report will be taken through to Cabinet in February to reflect on the progress so far and the next 12 months. So that can.
Okay, there's a stat I didn't expect to see on the subject of EDI, that 20% of elected members are brought out in a coughing fit as soon as the subject's mentioned.
That was your aftershave, Mr. Chairman. Your aftershave that caused that, I suspect.
I was worried it was mine because they both...
No indications. I've got a leading question, really. You've referred to, along the presentation, Diversity and Inclusion Steering Group and the EDI forums. I just wonder what the composition of those groups are and how you establish that they are the critical friends that they should be. Because obviously EDI is a very difficult subject to be objective about when you're within the organisation that you're trying to evaluate.
Thank you. Myself and Kerry are the corporate leads for equality, diversity and inclusion, so we form part of the steering group. That also includes Christian as the Assistant Director for Communications, because clearly communications both within the organisation and externally is really important, and also members of both myself and Kerry's team. So the steering group itself is officer representative of key officers that have a sort of functional role in this agenda, and the focus groups and the various employee groups that exist within the organisation, they are self-formed, so we've deliberately tried not to intervene or set restrictions or parameters or definitions. What we've tried to do is to create and continue to create an environment whereby people that have a particular interest or motivation within a particular area that sits within the equality sort of agenda more broadly come together with self-interest and a positive interest to make a difference both for themselves and wider colleagues. So I suppose by definition they are representative of those particular self-interest groups, but we don't seek to put parameters in terms of the membership of those staff-led groups.
Okay, I can see the point of self-selection and, you know, that has its positives and negatives. I just wonder whether you need an external input as well as the internal.
That's a point that we are currently in development around. So what we've been trying to establish is, again, what other mechanisms have we got in the broader Staffordshire public sector of other ED&I groups, either within the NHS or within our district and boroughs, that again we can connect with those similar kind of steering groups, so we can do that challenge and make sure we're sharing best practice across the public sector. We're also committed to this year having a look at the representation on the steering group itself and looking for opportunities to get some broader representation from some of the frontline parts of the organisation. So we're looking at the potential for officers from health and care and children and families and EINS to actually join that steering group as well.
Leader next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to remind ourselves that equality, diversity and inclusion, known by the acronym as ED&I, is a means to an end, not an end in its own right. The fact that we have equality of opportunity, the fact we have a diverse employee workforce, the fact that we're inclusive allows us to take a broad view of the work that we have to do in supporting our communities. We do spend a lot of time making sure that we've got that as right as we can do, but it is a part of a means to an end, not just something that we end up in a sort of vortex worrying ourselves about endlessly. We've got to make sure that we're representative, but we've still got to get the job done.
Councillor Charlotte Atkins.
Thank you, Chair. It's good to see that we have a diversity and inclusion steering group at a high level, because I think it's absolutely vital that we have a steering group which is not only diverse in itself, but also sufficiently high-level officers to push it through. Otherwise, it can be a very isolating task to be on a steering group which is not taken any notice of. But good to see it's being overseen by both the leader and the deputy chief executive. I was interested in your use of apprenticeships to ensure that people from diverse and underrepresented groups come into the county council. And I know that the county solicitor has been doing some work on this, but what I'm interested in knowing is how far this is developed, because I see that the actual strategy is not going to be approved until maybe the end of March next year. So what's happening in the county at the moment on apprenticeships? Are we talking about apprenticeships at all levels, including up to degree level? And what's your experience in terms of increasing diversity? Is that both in terms of ethnic minorities, but also women? Because obviously, traditionally in the past, apprenticeships have been seen as a sort of male preserve, but clearly they're now much more widely spread across different roles by comparison with maybe 10, 20 years ago. So it'd be interesting to know what's happening there and why the strategy is not yet signed off, if I know, as I know that there's already some work being done on apprenticeships. So where are we going with it? Thank you.
Thank you. So we do already have an apprenticeship strategy that's been in place for some time. We are looking to refresh that strategy. As I'm sure you're aware, that strategy has created opportunities for existing staff and managers to access the levy for professional development. That has included management development, so through the ILM programme up to and including masters. So we're using the apprentice levy through the strategy both to provide increased opportunities for people to join the county council. We're also using the levy and passporting some of the funds to our partner organisations to increase opportunities beyond Staffordshire County Council, and also using it to provide, as I say, professional development opportunities for our existing staff and managers. What I don't have in front of me today is any of the data in terms of the impact of that from a sort of equality and diversity perspective specifically, but very happy to bring back and share through the minutes more of the data in relation to the strategy and number of apprenticeships, etc.
Interested in what you say about partner organisations and sharing the levy with them. I'd be interested to know which partner organisations. So are we using apprenticeships at all levels? I mean, you're talking about professional development, but are we using it also at entry level to ensure that we are growing our own workforce in terms of particularly people who would not necessarily put themselves forward for promotion or training? So are you finding that apprenticeships are being used in a way to develop the workforce we already have and to ensure that they get some sort of outside validation? But presumably a lot of this is going to be learning on the job as well as maybe college work and so on. So how is that actually working at all levels within the organisation?
So we're very confident it's working well at all levels. So as vacancies arise within a particular team, members of my team encourage the managers to consider whether those roles can be converted into apprentice roles. We have many trainee opportunities that exist already within the county council. So similarly through the apprentice levy, because that's funding that we can access, looking to and have converted those trainee roles into apprentice roles to be able to access the funding. There's a requirement as part of an apprenticeship to spend 20% of the working week in learning. That doesn't mean that someone has to be off the job for 20% because it's not necessarily all formal learning, but that's a critical and mandatory element of the apprenticeship programme itself. So what we have done is invested to make sure that managers are skilled to support staff within their teams who are undertaking apprenticeships, to make sure that they're getting the appropriate support, mentorship, supervision, and also development sort of in role through other members that will be part of those teams.
Partner organisations?
I don't know off the top of my head which partner organisations that have benefited from our levy, but I will find that information out and share that.
Sir Jeremy Pert.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to reflect on sort of the general employment market, which is quite tight. You know, finding good quality employees to fill some of the vacancies that are in the general market is really tight. So doing anything that we can to be a council or an employer of choice, I think, is really important. I guess that somewhat touches on what the leader was talking about. But I want to just, and I don't want to sort of be a wordsmith this morning, but I just wanted to reflect on the three principles. Two of the principles relate to what the County Council is going to do. And the third talks about Staffordshire overall being a place where there is equality of opportunity for all, regardless of circumstance. And I want to just sort of quietly reflect whether there was a role for the County Council to take a community leadership role and demonstrate to others that it wasn't just a legal position, equality, diversity and inclusion, but also one which is an opportunity for other employers to improve the stickiness of employees to their organisation. And I'm sure there's lots of other things that we're doing to try and retain and recruit good quality people, not just sort of this element of it, but I wondered whether there was a community leadership role that we could have taken within the three principles. It may be implicit in there.
I think it's a very important suggestion, and we, as you know, participate in the things like the Integrated Care Board, Integrated Care Partnership, where we are advocating our responsibilities and our performance in employment. When it comes to the private sector, it's a different matter. I think you do find a varying degree of participation in this subject of equality, diversity and inclusion by employers. Generally, the larger corporates are very switched on to this, and sometimes the owner-manager businesses are less so, and that's it's really a second-order thought. I have to say, from a personal perspective, as an employer myself, I've only really started giving this a lot more thought as a subject since I became the portfolio holder. I need to speak to the person that gave me this role, look hard in the mirror. It's been an interesting journey of discovery, actually, to find out about how much I don't know about equality, inclusion and diversity, and how much we are doing in order to make ourselves an attractive employer. I'll go back to your the thrust of your question. Do we have a leadership role amongst our communities? Yes, we do. And publishing this report is a way of us demonstrating that we are happy to share our credentials and our ambition and effort amongst our partners.
Bob Spencer.
Chair, thank you for that. Just looking at some of the protected characteristics, it's always difficult. For example, disability and religion there. It's always difficult, isn't it, to try to make decisions around some of these important issues when, for example, if I take religion as an example, we have a 41% unknown in the data, then that could skew those particular figures, I suppose, either way. The other bit for me, though, really is in that, because we have a category of no religion, it just seemed unusually high, that 41%. Is that 41% because we haven't asked them, or does it more worryingly point to a situation where people don't want to express a religion within the organisation? The second point as well, just around the pay gap. We have made this, and I fully accept that it's lower than national standards, and that's to be celebrated, of course, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't at least challenge ourselves over this. I do wonder just how useful the mean hourly pay gap is, given the large number of people that we have and the various roles. I think that median measurement is perhaps more important, and it still stands at nearly 14%. And later on in the document, we segregate our workforce into those quartiles, the upper and lower quartile. If we are serious about tackling this gap, do we have the median hourly pay gaps for each of those quartiles? Therefore, we're able to identify where that particular gap is more acute.
Could I ask Councillor Spencer for some clarification about the question around religion versus no religion? What will be the gist of your concerns about the fact that we've got a good proportion of our employee cohort who express no religion?
There is a section for no religion, so you can say that you have no religion. 40%, I think it was, I'll go back and check, 41% is not known. And my concern is, have we asked them? And more worryingly, does that paint a picture that there are people in our organisation who are fearful? Because if you have no religion, there is a box to say, I've got no religion. So is there, and I hope it isn't, I'm pretty sure it isn't, but is there a concern that we have a large proportion of our workforce that would seem reluctant to tell us what their religion is?
I'm not sure we can deduce that from the data, whether or not there is. Can I help
here? Because the census data has just been published for the country, and it's gone down from something like 51% who expressed a religion down to about 41%. So the country is becoming less religious, less declared religion. So I don't think the Staffordshire data is any different to the national picture.
No, sorry, my concern wasn't that. It was just that we have a box for no religion. So if I feel free to express whatever my religious beliefs are, I can say what they are or say I don't have one. The fact that we don't know a large proportion of our workforce, again, is that because we just simply haven't asked them?
So the way we generally, most organisations collect that is through the recruitment process. So as standard now, there would be questions that candidates are asked to share their gender, age, etc., etc. There are many long-standing members of staff that work for Staffordshire County Council whose employment probably predates the point at which those questions became standard within the recruitment process, which in part explains the reason why we don't hold that data for some of our staff. What we do ask people to do, though, because we have a system, My HR system, which is self-serve, people can go into that system. So we do ask through communications campaigns periodically to ask staff to log in and update their personal information and what's described as sensitive data, and have done that quite recently as part of our business continuity planning. So I would hope that over time, as we have a turnover of staff and new people join the organisation, I think today people are more open to sharing what may have been more sensitive or personal data than the past, as well as through our ongoing communications and encouraging and inviting people to update their information, that the number of people that we don't know that information and we haven't got that on record will reduce, and over time the information that we hold in respect of every protected characteristic group, we are seeking to get to as close as possible to 100%.
Thank you.
I have a question on the appendix, which starts on page 39. It's the summary of all the various strategies that are in place. And I can see that column 1 is very good. It's in depth. It goes to quite some length to describe all the individual objectives. Column 3 has obviously been recently populated to say when things are being started, and it refers to launch dates. It refers to first drafts having been written. The comment really is on column 4 on the measures of success. It's generally open-ended. So where we've got launch documents and we've got a policy commencing, I don't see many review dates, and I just wondered if it's possible to tie that down a little bit and say we should be having a 6-month view or a 12-month view along the way.
I agree entirely with that proposal, and we'll incorporate it.
I don't see any other comments. Are we happy that we've given it the view? Okay, thanks for your contributions and thanks for your attendance. We'll move on to item 6, which is governance of outside bodies and the partnership review. Starts on page 63 of the report, or 65 if you're looking at the PDF. And we've got Kate Loader, who's here as the company solicitor, who's going to be speaking on it. Did you want to lead off, or? Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just waiting for Mr. Eberle and our trainee solicitor, Miss Edwards, who have also contributed to the report. They are watching downstairs. I'm sure they will be here.
Right, I've just introduced the item governance of outside bodies and the partnerships review. Over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. This matter was last presented to this committee on the 13th of September with an update report that set out the proposed further work that needed to be undertaken. This report's brought today for further consideration with recommendations about the further work that needs to be done as a result of the interrogation and work that's been done to date in relation to outside bodies and in relation to companies, that's limited companies and LATCOs. The report is split into 2 sections. I propose, if I may, to simply run through in order of the presentation of sections, then present the matter for any questions and feedback. The report before you contains a number of appendices. What we've attempted to do within this report is draw together at quite high level the summary and initial findings and demonstrate the methodology about how we've undertaken this review against the substantial guidance that's now available. Starting then, if I may, with the recommendations, which I'll move to at the end. In terms of the first part, deals with LATCOs and companies. The committee will note the methodology that's been undertaken. We have the benefit of 2 really helpful guidance pieces that appear at the appendices of this matter, the BDO report and then the local authority companies guidance. Both of those analysis and guidance have been considered when formulating a checklist against which we've then scrutinised the companies that are known to us. At your internal page 65 of the report, you can find the analysis of checklist findings. And that is, one limited company was unable to find its articles of association and could only rely on a copy from Companies House. As the committee will be aware, it's a statutory obligation to have available to the limited company the articles of association. 6 out of the 7 companies did not provide or did not have a shareholder agreement. 3 companies, including the LATCO, had members and cabinet members as directors of the company. This then led us on to consider the significance or otherwise of having both members, cabinet members and officers on all companies, but in particular LATCOs. And you will see there part of the recommendation that we've come to is that there's further consideration be undertaken in relation to the conflict position that may arise out of those posts being held, together with consideration for indemnities for members and officers being necessary. We also found 2 companies are sitting dormant. I can confirm to the committee there's very active work underway in relation to legal services in relation to those companies with a view to winding them up. And 1 company provided information of an SCC officer acting as a company secretary, but that wasn't the position on Companies House. So would it be of assistance, Chairman, if I paused at the end of part 1 before moving to part 2 to take any questions on the part 1?
It might be. I'll see if there's any questions on part 1. Just one question in terms of contacting each of the LATCOs. Was there a follow-up, or was it one communication and that's the result of what we had from that one attempt?
Thank you. There was certainly more than one attempt in relation to all of the LATCOs. There's been I should have introduced those present. To my left sits Beth Edwards, who's a trainee solicitor who I'm very grateful to her support she provided. She's had a number of exchanges with all of the companies and the one LATCO that we have in terms of establishing the information.
In that case, I think we're ready for part 2.
Thank you. One final thing to iterate in relation to part 1 is the guidance is available to us. It's been very helpful in terms of formulating what we need to do next. However, one of the recommendations made is for us to do our own governance review. The guidance helps us. We need to find what's right for Staffordshire and work out what works for Staffordshire and what best fits the model and our objectives. So just to stress that this isn't going to be a checklist and a tick box exercise from guidance recommendations by other organisations, valuable though that is. If I may then come on to part 2, elected member representation on outside bodies. I'm very grateful to Mr. Eberly, who sits next to me, and to his team for the work that they've done in relation to collating the information that forms part of this report. In summary, out of the 156 bodies that are identified on the appendix, I'm going to move to the analysis of survey reports, whilst noting that there was a limited return from elected members in relation to the survey information. Nonetheless, I think it is very helpful in giving us an indication of the further work that needs to be undertaken. The headlines are that there have been 14 outside bodies that have been attended by the elected member once in the last 12 months. 41 outside bodies have been attended more than once in the last 12 months, including the 14 that have been attended only once. 36 outside bodies have not been attended by the elected member at all in the last 12 months. And you will note from the conclusion of this report that tells us at least there's 36 outside bodies that require some further work and review. But there were 51 bodies where no report had been received, so obviously the number of 36 could grow. Then the report goes on to analyse from the returns we received as to why there had been some non-attendance. And you can see from the report there were 6 outside bodies where members had reported that they'd not been invited to attend meetings. The report goes on to just indicate that there's 8 members who have claimed expenses. It's absolutely appropriate to do so, but there is a lack of clarity in the returns about whether or not members should have been claiming expenses. So you will just note there's a recommendation for the Member and Democratic Services team to provide some additional clarity in relation to members' attendances. That concludes part 2. So if I may take feedback and questions on part 2. Thank you.
Councillor Kath Perry.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. It must have been a minefield trying to get all this together. Could I just ask a couple of questions? who calls the meetings normally? I used to have meetings called by the operative, by the officer who was joined with us at the meetings. Then we had lockdown. I'm talking specifically now, I suppose, about certain types of outside bodies, the quarries, for instance, where everything stopped. New people have taken over those positions in the certain areas, and so there haven't been any invites. So that might be something, and for purposes of this meeting, I think it's important that we still do have those. So I would like to think that we can reignite them again, because it's important, because it's usually from the communities we get the gripes, if you know where I'm coming from these, and it's nice to take it straight to the horse's mouth, which is the quarry owners. And I've attended over the last 12 months, and it's not one of my meetings actually, but I get called, so I call a meeting myself. I call the officer from here, she calls the meeting, and we've had several meetings over the last 18 months at one of the quarries because we get so much from the residents. So I'm just wondering, can we reignite that? That would be a good thing if we could. Reignite the quarry particularly, as they are part of the communities. I think, yeah, that was the one. And then some of the others that I sit on have actually been cancelled for certain reasons. There's been an invite, I've accepted, and then I've had notification to say it's been cancelled. And I'm talking about the family boards that I sit on. So just to flag that up with you, really, if we could sort of get that going again, would be a really good thing. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really helpful, and I've made a note. I think the answer is going to be it depends on the outside body and the formulation of the outside body. So I'm going to hand over to Mr. Eberly, who might be able to expand on that some more. But I think this is part of, there needs to be absolute clarity for members in terms of how these meetings should be taking place. But equally, this review is to work out where there's benefit. Your time is exceptionally precious. So we need to make sure that there's benefit for members, there's benefit for the community and the continuance of these. And there will absolutely be some more work to be undertaken. The next step in the review is for us to actually contact the outside bodies themselves. And I think that can certainly be part of the conversation. Thank you, Councillor Parry.
Councillor Pert.
Thank you, Chair. With your latitude, can I just go back to part one and ask a question, which is there any suggestion of wrongdoing or improper behaviour? Because I think that's probably I didn't take it from the report, but it's probably an appropriate question just to make sure that we've asked that.
No.
Councillor Charles Atkins.
Thank you, Chair. Representation on outside bodies seems to only go one way, in the sense that the county councillor will sit on an outside body, and clearly the outside body gets the benefit of the county councillor feeding information into that body. But we don't seem to get any sort of response back from the county councillor to other members, for instance, on a family improvement board, something like that. And it seems to me that it should be a two-way process, not a one-way process, if we're going to get the most out of it. Clearly, not all bodies that would be relevant with all bodies, but it seems to me that if a county councillor is representing the county council on an outside body, then there should be some way of finding out what's happening on that body to inform other county council members. And clearly, you know, where there is no contact or meetings haven't been called, clearly there needs to be a cull of those organisations, because it's pointless having names on bodies if they're not meeting or they're not sharing anything with the county councillor. But I am concerned about having a two-way process rather than just a one-way process. And it seems to me that otherwise we're not getting the full benefit of our involvement with our outside body, and whether you'd considered that in any way or shape or form.
Thank you. The the call that you've referred to, that's absolutely part of the work that is underway. In terms of how members bring the information back in and share their learning, it hasn't been part of the review at this stage. It's absolutely a good point, and where intelligence is obtained, it should be considered and shared where it's going to be of benefit to do so. It hasn't formed part of the consideration so far, but we can certainly take that back and consider how that can be incorporated in the next stage of the review.
Councillor Thompson, do you want to speak?
I think Councillor Atkins just asked my question. I attend the outside bodies, but I never go back with any report or tell anybody what's happened or how they're achieving or how they're not achieving. I never get to give any feedback to anybody, and I honestly wouldn't know who to go to give that feedback to if I was asked.
Thank you. Again, a really helpful feedback and point of learning for us to consider how to best make use of members' time and engagement with communities. Thank you.
I said something when we started the meeting on the first item. I know Kate was here for that, about my role when I had community responsibility on the cabinet of the district council. And we at the district council have an annual summary of all of the outside body representations. And there's two things that I would suggest possibly need to happen. One is a summary that's produced in front of members, so that in terms of a two-way, you've got the opportunity to say, well, what are you doing on this board? What's the purpose of it? You know, why isn't it meeting? Because until I'd seen this, I didn't even know we'd got all these representations. So I've been a councillor for 7 years, 6-7 years, and I didn't know these organisations even existed. So there's the two-way communication has got to be based on the fact that members know they exist in the first place and know what they want to achieve from them. And the other thing I'd suggest, again, mirroring what happens in my district, I don't know about anywhere else, but we have a member or members who are responsible for monitoring this list. And the obvious people would be the communities person, i.e. Councillor Wilson in the case of the county, and or somebody who has responsibility for governance, which might be the finance person or might be the deputy leader. And I would suggest that if, as well as all the recommendations that we've got in terms of having a look at these bodies and whether we should reduce the number, actually have some member input by those two means.
Thank you, Chairman. Noted. That's certainly something that we can take forward. I think that's very valuable feedback. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? No? Well, thanks for staying the duration of the meeting. Thanks for your involvement.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm mindful that I haven't closed with the recommendations themselves. They are form part of the body of the report. The recommendations, I hope, speak for themselves in terms of taking forward reporting back to audit and standards with the audit that's underway, with a further report to audit standards and bringing a further report back to this committee in relation to the outside bodies. Thank you, Chairman.
It is a good point. We're just going to go on to the work programme, and one thing I did mention to Mandy this morning is that, having said that we would possibly follow this recommendation to basically commission the monitoring officer and the company solicitor to review, I think that's the summary of what the recommendation is, we'd then want a follow-up meeting, and we were talking about whether we'd want to revisit that as early as February if that's possible, or our next opportunity would be April.
Thank you, Chair. But Chairman, in terms of the February report, I'm concerned I don't want to simply bring another update report to this committee. It would be my preference to actually bring the conclusions. February feels a little bit tight in terms of the work that I'm mindful that Member and Democratic Services are doing. May I suggest April with a view to it being a final report rather than a further update? Should the committee wish to receive an update report, I'm happy to bring that in February, Chairman.
The conversation we were having this morning was what April is fine, but if we're going to enact any changes to responsibilities, they tend to start from the new council coming in May. So whether we've got the opportunity, I think it's the 11th of April is the our next meeting, and then we've got a cabinet meeting, presumably first couple of weeks in May. Not cabinet, full council in
If I may, Chair. So it's entirely within the leader's gift in terms of making the appointments to committees, as you say, and it tends to happen at the start of the municipal year. But I think we shouldn't let that prohibit the council from making any changes in year if it's the view of this committee. So I think May would be my preference, but then obviously any changes could... I don't want to predetermine and say what the recommendations, but I think we can all probably already guess at what some of the recommendations may be in terms of the rather large list that we have. But in terms of some of the other ones, in terms of the more regular monitoring, the feedback reports, I think they can sort of be brought in year, if that was okay, if they were the recommendations that were adopted.
As I say, Mandy and I had a discussion, so we're just going to summarise where we got to.
So just the changes since the last meeting. The January meeting stays the same. The February meeting, the revised Children's Transformation Programme, I have been in touch with officers who feel that that date is a little bit too soon for the information and have requested the 11th of April meeting, if possible. And also the 11th of April, there's a new item on civil contingencies. It's a pre-decision report, if the committee is happy to accept that.
Are we happy with that? Yeah.
And with the revised Children's Transformation Programme information coming in April instead of February.
Okay. The one thing that I have noticed that we will have to change is the date for the reserve call-in will probably not be the 8th of May, given that it's going to be a bank holiday. So that one will need redating. Okay. With those changes, and as we've just said, revisiting the governance of outside bodies put onto April. Everybody happy with those changes? Okay, that concludes the meeting.